Welcome to the Museum of Lead Mining, Wanlockhead, and our 50th anniversary in 2024. Mining the Library brings you readings from our historic miner subscription library, established for a mutual improvement by the miners themselves in 1756. The library has national significance and is part of a unique group with neighbouring Lead Hills and Westerkirk. There are more than 2,500 volumes in our library. The oldest, printed is in 1615, is Gouget's The Whole Armour of God. There are books on travel, literature, history and science, books by and about women, and a whole series of periodicals, keeping readers up to date with current research, news and opinions. From this remarkable library, we have mined 5 books. Our readers will introduce each one.
Hello, my name is Jackie and I'm one of the guides at the museum. I'm reading from the Canary, its varieties, management and breeding, with portraits of the author's own birds. It's by the Reverend Francis Smith and was published in 1868. This is the story of Reverend Smith's own canaries: Yorkshire Spangles, Greens, Emperors, Belgians, Cinnamons and Turncrests, all with such different plumage and characters. It's his personal story, how his children reorganised their books and doll's house in the nursery to make space for an aviary, how sick birds were treated with homeopathic remedies, and each variety comes alive with his daughter's beautiful canary portraits. These may well be the only colour illustrations in the entire Wanlockhead library. Everybody knows the canary, or do they? Read on and prepare to be surprised. Chapter 1. A Plea for the Canary. Most persons, says Mr. Slaney in his interesting outline of the smaller British birds, are acquainted with 3 birds: a sparrow, a robin and a blackbird. Some beside know a skylark. As to the rest, they are often confounded under the general and rather degrading name of small birds. We have sometimes, he continues, asked our fair friends if they knew as many of the smaller birds as they could count on their fingers. They generally answered confidently in the affirmative, but could seldom get much beyond one hand. The ignorance here complained of is not limited to the wild species only, but it is equally true, we fear, of the tame. Take, for example, the subject of the following pages. Everybody supposes that they know a canary when they see it, but bring their knowledge to a practical test by a few plain questions, or set before them a bird whose plumage in any material degree differs from the ordinary yellow bird familiar to us all, and the chances are 10 to 1 that, like fair friends alluded to by Mr. Slaney, they will soon discover their mistake. I think I shall not be far wrong when I say that the only idea which most people have of our little favourite is limited to the bare fact that it is a yellow bird, having sometimes a patch of black on its head and wings, and singing lustily in its cage. But never was there a greater mistake. No bird represents such a variety in its plumage or exhibits so great a diversity in its shape. No one, we are bold to affirm, seeing the lizards, the cinnamon, or even a good green bird for the first time, unless a scientific naturalist would ever dream that they were canaries. Like many a greater undertaking, our Canaria had its original in a very small beginning. Its first traces, I believe, are to be found in a well-meant gift of a kind granny to my daughter Judy, who, I may as well say, once for all, was evidently born to love pigs and poultry, and which consisted of a common yellow canary purchased in the market of my native town. Had I been able to foresee the result of this very questionable action, it's more than likely that I should have exclaimed with Mr. Jorrocks, a famous fox-hunting celebrity and renowned, "Confound all presents what eats. While she, I think, would hardly have consented to the innocent cause of such a large expenditure in cages, birds and seed as that which has since taken place. Happily, however, for Judy, I was no seer, and Granny was not gifted, like the famous heroine of Lucknow, with second sight. The purchase was made on the eve of our return home from an annual visit we pay into the Shires, and back Dickie was brought to the smoky city of Manchester, where for many years it was our lot to be located. Of this bird I remember little, save that he was a good yellow, possessed a very amiable disposition, and was a most uproarious songster. Indeed, so noisy was he during lessons that my wife was obliged to cover his cage with a cloth before she ever began to teach, which the children, of course, voted a great shame. He lived a bachelor's life all alone for about 3 years, when he died in molting while we were all away from home in the autumn, probably from neglect, being left in charge of a servant who knew little and cared less about the requirements of birds under these trying circumstances. Great was the grief amongst our youngsters at this untoward event, for such a thing as his dying had never entered their heads, and they probably expected that he would live forever. To soothe their grief and repair the loss, on a fine Saturday morning towards the end of October, I and the 3 elder children, having set out on our usual marketing expedition, paid a sauntering visit to the bird fancier's stalls. Here we loitered about for some time, more out of curiosity than with any idea of buying, when we suddenly found ourselves standing before an old man's cage, who soon endeavoured to turn the occasion to account by soliciting our attention to the quality of his wares, and setting them off to the best advantage he could. Though the day was somewhat cold and bleak, and the birds were starved, we saw enough to make us listen to his tale, and finally to make a purchase of what seemed to us then a pretty little curiously marked grey-hen canary, but about which I shall have more to speak in another chapter. Leaving behind another singularly coloured companion, which after all perhaps was the prettier and certainly the more rare bird of the two. The one we purchased was, to a fancier's eye, by no means a good specimen of her kind, her feathers being all tipped with white, which they should not be, and her general colour being, instead of pure grey, tinged here and there with a yellowish green. Still, for all that, she was a very pretty bird, and we were all highly delighted with her purchase. We took her home, as usual, in a little paper bag, which, I may observe, is by far the best way of carrying a bird you purchase without a cage, and always to be had at the nearest grocer's shop, when she evinced a most amiable disposition, and soon became as tame as our original Dickie himself. Our turncrests. There is yet another variety of our favourite songster which I must not omit to mention, or which perhaps, more correctly speaking, may be found as it were by accident in most or all the kinds we have named, to wit, the turncrest. With some people these are great favourites, more especially with the lower classes of bird fanciers, from whom anything curious or novel appears to possess a great charm. Their peculiarity consists in having a crest of feathers on the top of the head, turned as it were the wrong way, and hanging down over the beak and eyes, something like an old-fashioned wool mop, or, if the association be not too irreverent, like the crop of a Cistercian monk. In general, as might be expected from the above remarks, they will be found most plentiful amongst the common low-bred birds of the country districts, and associated with the greatest amount of ugliness in the outline of their figure. To anyone with a cultivated taste or with a natural eye for beauty of form, this condemns them at once, but in proportion as you can find this elegant appendage in birds of more aristocratic breed, such as the Belgians, Of course, this objection loses its point, and you will have a bird of peculiar elegance and beauty. Having paired all our birds and returned them to the aviary, the next thing that became necessary was to provide them with the means of making their nest. When wild, the canary, as we have already stated, loves to build its nest in the branches of the orange tree on the banks of some silver stream, where the perfume of the flowers seems most grateful to its taste. To gratify this very natural propensity of their nature was wholly out of our power, we having neither orange trees nor greenhouse to offer them. Use, however, we knew was second nature, and therefore, as the latter is proverbially accommodating to the circumstances in which it finds itself, we did not despair of inducing our feathered friends to put up with a much more humble and unromantic situation. Well, but after all, you will say, these wooden boxes are but bricks and mortar of their residence, the bare walls, as it were, of their house. How did they fit them up and furnish them? In human families, most of us know, when a little stranger is expected, great preparations are made for this proper reception. There is a nice wicker cradle, a soft and downy mattress for his bed, fine warm wooden blankets to keep him warm, to say nothing of the white pincushion with its pink or blue ribbon and customary salutation inscribed in pinny type saying, "Welcome, little stranger." What have you then to correspond with all this? Did you go a-shopping? Who was your upholsterer and cabinet maker, and how did you provide for their wants? Happily, all these questions are soon answered. We had no suites of expensive mahogany, rosewood or walnut purchase. There was no perplexity in choosing between oak and maple painted or Japan ware. We had no anxiety about either the colour of our curtains or the texture of our carpets. Lace and muslin, damask and chintz, silk or marine had no charms for our newly married couples. No, they cared not a rush for Axminster or Turkey, Brussels or velvet pile, Scotch or Kidderminster, felt or drugget, coconut or oilcloth for their flooring. Having no windows, they required neither Venetians for their blinds, or white or buff hollands to keep out the sun. Gold cornices and rods were alike dispensed with. Being always on the wing, they wanted neither staircase nor other carpet in their bedroom or rocking chair to lull them to sleep. No, the furnishing of their house was a much more simple and inexpensive a matter. A little moss from some old forest tree, a little hair from the cow with the crumpled horn, and a little raw cotton given me by a friend, notwithstanding half the mills in Manchester were either on the point of stopping or of putting their hands on short time through lack of sufficient material to carry on their business, owing to the mortal strife then going on between the northern and southern states of America, was all that we required. Having first thoroughly cleaned the moss and scalded the hair with boiling water for the purpose of killing all vermin that might be therein, we dried it again before the fire, and then with a further addition of cotton, put the whole in little string nets made for the purpose, which we hung outside the wires of the aviary, that the birds might not pull it all in pieces by way of amusement, as otherwise they would be very likely to do. The moss made a very good mattress, the hair answered the purpose of a good feather bed, whilst the cotton supplied the place of a pair of the warmest Whitney blankets or eider-down quilt, shutting out all cold and making altogether a couch such as the most luxurious lady of the land might envy and desire. Unlike the English finches, to wit, the goldfinch, chaffinch and linnet, the canary finch is but a rough and clumsy builder, caring comparatively little for the external neatness of its nest, though the interior is laid in and finished with considerable care and attention to its appearance. Still, of its performance, no less than that of these superior artists, may we say with Herdis, in that beautiful poem entitled The Village Curate, which I won't read. Thank you for listening.
We hope you have enjoyed mining the library with us. You can visit the library as part of our museum tour. Book your tickets online at www.leadminingmuseum.co.uk or at reception when you arrive. To preserve our historic library, we are not able to allow free access, but anyone with a special research interest is welcome to contact us to discuss arrangements for access. Our contact is info@museumofleadmining.co.uk.